Good morning. I'm Sarah Elizabeth. I use she, her pronouns. If you're listening in, I'm a tall, middle aged female of European descent with wavy, graying, long brown hair tucked behind my ears. I'm on screen from the collarbone up with red brown wall behind me, and I'm seated in a chair. Welcome to this community. Welcome to this moment. Welcome to this breath. I invite you to connect with your breath as you begin to notice yourself settling wherever, whenever you are in time and space. Invite another breath and notice your inner landscape. There's no place to go, there's nothing to do. Maybe your mind is someplace else, you're making a list, or it feels uncomfortable to notice. Give yourself the gift of just noticing. Noticing your thoughts, noticing sensations in your body, and follow the guidance or not. Listen to whatever is arising. I invite awareness of the seat beneath you, and take a moment to feel your feet as they meet the floor, and notice your next breath moving down through the legs to meet your feet. Notice your belly. Notice your rib cage. Notice the shoulders, neck, and head. And then bring your awareness back to your chest, noticing your heartbeat. And as you take your next breath, notice as the lungs press inwards on the heart, feeling the heart receive a gentle hug with the next breath and the next one. Gently bring yourself back to awareness of the space that you're sitting in. Notice the room, the sanctuary, or the space around you. Notice the light coming through the window, and take one more breath with awareness in this moment. Becoming aware of the sensations in our bodies, the sensations of being present. Watching the wandering, chattering mind is a moment of listening. Listening to what's happening inside our physical bodies is one way to offer empathy to ourselves. We notice this vehicle that moves us through our daily life, and we give it our attention. Sometimes I become aware of inner agitation. Sometimes time seems to slow down. Sometimes I notice my shoulders let go. I relax. My mind slows down. So why begin here? Why meet empathy with awareness of our breath and how it moves through the body? As I've explored listening and empathy through the practice and facilitation of restorative circles, and through my daily life, really, I've come to understand that there are three parts to cultivate listening. There's the listening to what's going on within us. There's the listening to what we are expressing out to the world. And there's the listening for what's coming to us, the meaning that's coming towards us. When we watch our thoughts, it's in a moment to understand ourselves better. When we listen for what it is that's being shared with us, it's an opportunity to notice what our friends, family members, community members really mean. Reflecting back that meaning that we're hearing is an act of empathy. These three ways of listening are operating in us, through us, all the time. Think about our story for all ages this morning, and they all saw the cat. It's really a window into how many different ways a cat can be seen. There are so many lenses: the boy, the fox, the bird, the bee, the mouse, the fish, the flea, the worm, the bat. They all see the cat, each through their own eyes, through their own experience. Each has a different vision, a different relationship, or a different experience of seeing the cat. Each also expresses in their body language different feelings as they experience the cat. The child sees the cat and is connected. The cat roams around the child's legs. There's a feeling of closeness. The mouse sees the cat as a dark, clawing monster. A bee sees the cat as a collection of dots through its many faceted eyes. The cat walked through the world with its whiskers, ears, and paws, and they all saw the cat. What might we hear from the mouse if the mouse described the cat? The flea, the bee, or the worm? Did you happen to catch the cat's glance back at the fox, which showed a little intimidation and fear? The bird was happy to fly above in the sky and view the cat from the treetops. Each was expressing their own feelings and needs from their relationship to the cat. This is a story that comes from Asia. You may be familiar with it. Blind people are asked to engage and notice an elephant. They go to inspect the elephant. The first person touches the trunk and says, "This being is like a snake." Second person touched its legs and said, "This elephant, it's like a pillar or a tree trunk." The one whose hands met the elephant's side said, "The elephant is like a big, tall wall." And yet another described the elephant as feeling like a rope. In different stories, they each turn to argue their point of view about what this elephant is. In some versions of the story, the people come to blows, trying to determine who's telling the truth and who's lying. Most of us have the advantage of having seen an elephant in photographs, some maybe even in a zoo. We can envision the elephant standing in the courtyard. Each person is led to a different place to make their examination. We know that each blind person is right in their description. They each touched one spot. They only had one perspective. Where was the listening in this story? Where was the curiosity at what the other person might have noticed? Where was the wisdom to notice someone else's experience might actually be true for them? Too often, we discount or don't even register an experience that we're told. How many times do you hear a friend tell you something important that happened and you respond and say, "Oh, it wasn't so bad," or "I had that experience too and I got beyond it." When I was telling someone about my adult children and how they've gone off into their lives and I rarely see them, expressing some sadness at letting them go, often I hear, "Don't worry, they'll be back, maybe when they're 25 or 26. Sometimes in conversation, we respond to a friend by telling a story of our own. "Hey, I can do you one better than that." Or from time to time, we begin to ask questions. "Well, who was at the show with you? And what time did you go? How was the traffic getting there? Was there a band that opened? Were they any good? What'd you do afterwards?" All of these questions lead this person to tell us what we want to know. It doesn't necessarily allow them to share their story and their experience with us. These common ways of responding to people are lost opportunities to express understanding and empathy. Think about that for a moment. We miss offering empathy when we negate someone's experience, or we try to one up or one down them, or ask a series of questions. All these responses, although we intend them to be empathetic often show lack of regard for the person and what's being shared. And we're not even aware of it because we do this all the time. What alternatives do we have to operating the way we've always operated? Well, let's go back to the story of the elephant. What if the blind people were to listen to one another and reflect together on what they each touched on the elephant? What if, rather than arguing from their own point of view, maybe they had a conversation? Ah, so you found a place that was rough and felt like a tall wall. So you say the elephant feels like a rope. And there's a tree-like part of this elephant. I hear you say it's like a snake. Hmm, how can an elephant be all these things at once? Like a wall. Well, this elephant is rather large and tall. When I heard you say like a snake, your voice came from a long, far away distance. And you know, by the way, when I was holding this rope, there was this really pungent smell. Well, maybe these are tail and nose ends. I did feel something warm, air moving from out of the snake-like part. Hey, we haven't felt how this elephant stands. Maybe we can check to see how many tree-like parts there are. On further reflection, the blind people go back and feel again, gathering more information from each other's perspectives, integrating the experience into a more whole understanding. Take a moment to think about someone you've been in conflict with. What are you feeling about that situation? What are the words you might use to express those feelings? What is it that you need? Do you need something different? Do you need to be heard? Do you need acceptance? Do you need to ask for help? What is it that the other person needs or feels about the situation? What if you were curious and asked? What might happen if we communicated in order to understand the meaning of what's being shared with us? What if you were given the opportunity to speak and have the meaning of what you said reflected back from the other person? What might you hear? How might you feel differently? How would this change how you see the elephant in the courtyard? So let me go back to the springtime of 2009 and tell you a story of one of our first community's restorative circles. One Easter Sunday, during the story for all ages, the children were asked, "What is Easter?" as a part of a skit led by our teenagers. They'd been identifying different holidays. My then 12-year-old son raised his hand and in an excited voice replied, "Easter is when the Easter bunny brings chocolate and we get a sugar high." There was laughter across the sanctuary. Soon after this, joys and sorrows followed, and there was an open mic. One of our congregation members, Lorna, came to the microphone and spoke of her disapproval of the children's story. Is this what we want our children to know about Easter? There was silence in the sanctuary as my parenting, indeed the parenting of many people that morning, was called into question. And the whole congregation, maybe 200 people, were there to witness this. I don't think I heard the sermon which followed. I'm not sure that Lorna heard the sermon either. After going out to the car, my son was so upset, he told me he didn't want to return to church ever again. Now, mind you, I'm a third generation Unitarian Universalist. I was thinking of withdrawing from membership that day. Yet this was my spirit's home. I reached out to the Restorative Circles team, which I was a member of. Laurel and Craig agreed to facilitate a circle. They met with myself and my son. They met with the minister and the director of religious education. They met with Lorna, and they met with two other youth who had also spoken during the story for all ages. In the circle, we heard from my son, who spoke about how challenging it was for him and how sad and angry he was at being quoted by Lorna. I heard from the minister that she had always wanted to share this particular story with the children in the congregation she was serving. The director of religious education said she thought it was a great idea, and she went along with the story without questioning it. Lorna expressed her pain. Lorna had come to church that morning, having been in a new job for about 6 months. She was struggling in her job, struggling with her boss. And she came that morning to hear the good news of Easter. She was looking for solace, for peace, for renewal. And the children's story was very disappointing to her. Lorna also expressed being upset with herself and the circumstances. She had met with the minister the following day and talked about not returning to church. I shared about how upset I was as well. The minister spoke about the good news that Lorna was looking for that Sunday. The sermon followed the joys and sorrows moment. As we spoke and heard from one another and reflected the meaning we understood, we began to understand the circumstances of everything that had unfolded that moment. Each of us in our own way began to soften towards the other. And then, all of a sudden, my son piped up, "I forgive you." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As our collective hurt dissolved, we created a plan to cultivate our relationships. The minister, Lorna, and I agreed to write about our experience in the circle and what we now understood, and have that published in Parish Notes, our newsletter. To this day, when Lorna and I see one another at church, we check in. Lorna always asks how my son is doing. He's now 23, and he is working as a cook in a local restaurant. I ask Lorna about her grandchildren, who are the light of her life and are growing up. Both Lorna and I remain members of our congregation. Your congregation is facing a challenging time right now. Though your settled minister, the Reverend Patricia Owen, resigned almost 3 years ago, there may be repercussions from this transition affecting members sitting amongst you today. You welcomed the Reverend Jim Macomber as your transitional minister over a year ago in order to find a way forwards and to have his leadership and guidance at this challenging time. As you continue to discuss the next steps to take as a community, there are those of you who may still be mourning the transition from more than 3 years ago. This mourning may be more deep than you've even expressed to this point. Some of you may feel anguish, resentment, and continued frustration, a longing, a vulnerability, or even anger. Some of you may feel relief and may feel more comfortable and ready to move forwards now. Some of you may need acknowledgement. You may need to be understood. You may need to find compassion for yourself and for others. You also may feel the need to stand in solidarity with one another. And there may be need for transparency and discernment. There is a path forwards. You are resilient, strong, committed, and connected with one another in ways that you have not yet discovered. I invite you to take the journey that is before you and deeply listen to one another, to reflect the meaning of what you hear expressed from your friend, from a co-parent, from a fellow leader. Sit with your discomfort from time to time. Sit with the joy, for it will come. I invite you to create moments for empathy through listening to and reflecting on what most needs to be expressed by you and among you. This is a time for being gentle with yourselves and each other as you lean in. Offer yourself empathy by listening to your breath. Notice your own body and mind and where you are as you engage. Name your feelings. Notice what needs are arising in your individual beings and in the community as a whole. Cultivate your listening skills. Experience what it is like to truly be heard without someone telling you your feelings will shift. Notice what it's like to truly hear someone and to offer understanding first, and notice the empathy that creates. Practice listening together. It may not come easily, it may be hard. Fall down 7 times, get up 8 times. Some of you will bounce back more easily than others. Some will wander in and out. Some of you will recommit to community. Each of you will have your own experience of the elephant during this transition. Be gentle with yourself and one another. This cannot be said too many times. Be gentle with yourselves and one another. Find moments of empathy. Grieve together, mourn together, be together. The people next to you are surging to become something. They have a story and a song. They want to be known. They want to know. The people next to you believe something, stand for something, count for something, labor for something. They wait for something. Continue together through your tears and anger and frustration and pain, joy and sorrow. Be on this journey together. Do not turn away. Turn towards each other. Listen to one another with curious minds and open hearts. Commit to the struggle together on this journey towards understanding one another's feelings and needs. Let this be a place where we can learn how to leave the house of fear and dwell together in the house of love.